Let's talk about all the books that I read in November. It by far was not my best reading month, but you know what? I knew that going in because it was my busy time. But I read, I think, 11 or 12 books in the month of November, which I'm shocked that I even got through all of that. So let's just dive into it. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Before we get into all the books that I read in November, always remember to like and subscribe. It really helps my channel out. I am trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, so if you want to share and spread the word, I would absolutely love that. Also, in my description box below, you'll find all of my links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Pango Books account, Amazon wishlist, and also my Bookish Box Ambassador link where you get 10% off the entire store. So let's talk about the books that I read in November. I had a pretty good reading month. I think I found some new favorites, but I also had a couple DNFs. And we'll get into that whenever I get to those books. But I did not expect, out of all the books that I read this month, that I would actually DNF the two that I did. So I was really shocked about that. First book that I did read in November is Fantasy Lover by Sherilyn Kenyon. I do not know what to say about this book. I was all over the place with my feelings on it. I did rate it a 3-star. That means that I had an okay time. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. I am not continuing on with this series. I think it's written very well. And you can definitely tell that it is an older paranormal romance. And it's just the vibe and the writing and stuff. It just wasn't keeping my attention. But what did keep my attention is this girl who has been pretty much celibate, not dating or anything. Her friend ends up convincing her to do this ritual where you summon this Greek god out of a book, and he is supposed to basically pleasure you for 30 days and then go about his way. When he is summoned and our girl is face to face with him, she's like, this is not what I want. No, please don't touch me. She ends up falling for him and wanting to free him because he's been a slave like this for centuries. So she is trying to find a way without damning her soul as well. And it's their romance. This actually wasn't terrible. I want to say that the characters and stuff seemed believable, like whenever they were falling for each other, growing closer, because it wasn't an instantaneous thing, but time was jumping so quickly. You would be in one day and then like the next chapter, it was like, you know, a week later. And I understand you have to progress time, but it didn't feel natural. It didn't flow the way that I would want it to. Also, I can definitely see where the series is getting set up. I just don't like the same basically regurgitated storyline where someone is in the book, someone's gonna summon them, rinse and repeat. And I don't know if that is how the rest of the series is, but the way that this book ended, it kind of seemed like the next book was going to be that. And I just didn't want to read the same story. And so for that, I am not continuing, but I'm glad that I read it. I'm glad that I saw what people really love about this series. It's just not for me. If you watched my October wrap up, you would know that I immediately went into book 2 in this series, which is Wrath of the Damned by Ella Fields. I wanted to finish up this duology. I was hooked from Nectar of the Wicked. I wanted to know how this story continued because our girl her name is Flea. She is a changeling where she was raised in the human world. Her human mother, not her biological mother, her human mother raises her knowing that she's a changeling and that she wants to get her own daughter back. When she turns 21, she then is taken to basically be bartered with the Fae so she can get her own daughter back and they can take her. Things do not go the way they planned and Flea is on her own. She ends up having to work at a pleasure house. One of the patrons takes an interest in her, but nothing like really happens. And then all of a sudden we find out that he is a prince in the Fae world, and we're whisked away with that story, and it is their romance. I really enjoyed book 1. Absolutely devoured it. Wrath and the Damned did not hold up for me. I feel like we veered entirely off course. I feel like the romance was so instantaneous. I feel like the storyline was getting kind of muddled with a lot of the spicy scenes. I didn't really feel for the characters like I did in book 1. I felt like there was more tension, more banter, more, angst between them. In book 2, that was entirely gone. It was like Flea was just so infatuated with this guy. This guy was so infatuated with her. You're trying to find out the mystery of who Flea is, where she comes from, and I really liked that mystery aspect, but it just kind of lost it for me, so I ended up giving it a 2-star. I am glad that I finished up this duology, so I kind of know how this story wraps up, how Flea and the romance and everything goes as well, but I could have done without reading book 2. I then finished my ARC read, which it was well after it was released, but that is On Wings of Blood by Briar Bolin. This is the first book in the Bloodwing Academy series, I think is what it's going to be called. However, I read this like a couple weeks after it released. I was so far behind. I'm so sorry, Briar. My job was just running me down. I've already apologized to her 1,000 times, but you guys, you have to go and read this. 5 stars. I devoured it. I loved every minute of it. This is a spinoff from the Queen of Roses series, that 4-book series that came out earlier this year. And I would say you really do need to read that series to understand who our main character is in this series, because she's established in the Queen of Roses series. She's established, you know who she is, where she came from, kind of what she went through and stuff to get to where she's at the start of this book. However, if you don't want to commit to a 4-book series before reading this, you don't have to. I would say that it would make a little bit more sense. There would be some plot holes that were answered for you if you did read it. However, you could read this as its own series, I feel, because you kind of learn who Medra is as we go along, and you're kind of learning with her. You're just not going to understand a few references or kind of who the person in her head is. You do learn who they are, but you wouldn't understand kind of the dynamic of that. So I absolutely love this. You are following Medra, who basically wakes up, she's supposed to be dead, in this world where there are vampires, and she is taken to this academy where now she is betrothed to one of the royalty, Fae, if you will. His name is Blake Drakeharrow, and it comes from one of like the 4 houses. Take Harry Potter, mix it with, I think she says 4th wing, because there are dragons in this series, and also sprinkle in a little bit of dark academia, I would say. You have this. Blake gives all the Draco Malfoy vibes. If you are into that, definitely check out Blake. He is by far one of the best book boyfriends ever. I loved this series. She is betrothed to Blake. She doesn't want to. She's reluctant. In this world, you have 3 people that are all betrothed. You have the head of them, which would be Blake, and then you have 2 other people where, he can kind of get his magic and things like that from. So he is already betrothed to this girl named Reagan, who is a high-blood vampire. He's been betrothed to her since he was young. Now he's betrothed to Medra as well, and she wants nothing to do with this. Reagan is nothing but cruel to her at the beginning. Then she tries to be her friend. Things don't go the way that you think that they would. We are diving into a lot of lore, a lot of history. We're learning about the world together with Medra because she's never been here. We learn about the dragons and the dragon riders, what happened to the dragons, the vampires and kind of their hierarchy. I absolutely love this. This is enemies to lovers for sure. And Blake giving all the Draco Malfoy vibes, I was here for it. So if you love Harry Potter, Fourth Wing, Dark Academia vibes, and you like enemies to lovers, great banter, and a little bit of Draco Malfoy sprinkled in there, definitely pick this book up. Like I said, you can read it on your own, but if you want the full experience, read the Queen of Roses series first. The next book that I ended up reading was The Veiled Kingdom by Holly Renee. I loved this book as well. I am desperate to get to the second book. However, I've heard that the second book isn't quite as great, and I'm pretty sad about that, but I still want to read it nonetheless. However, this book follows Nira, and she is basically the heir to the throne, but she is hidden in the city. No one knows who she is. She likes to keep it that way. She's staying far away from her father. Somehow she runs into Dacre, who is basically like the heir to the rebellion. She ends up going with them because she's like kind of kidnapped, but not really. She starts training with them. She gets close to Dacre. It's kind of like their romance. And then the twist at the end of this book had me floored and shocked. I absolutely loved it. You have training scenes in here. You have found family, the rebellion against the monarchy, and a girl who is trying to stay hidden with a little bit of a forbidden romance in there. I loved this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I can't wait to go on to the next book, which is The Hunted Heir. I highly suggest if you want to get into kind of a fast-paced read where you want to learn about the world as our character goes along with it, and you have some great banter, training scenes, a great forbidden romance, and a mystery on top of that, definitely pick up The Veiled Kingdom. I really, really loved it. I loved the banter between the 2 main characters. I loved the politics and the world building. I am going into book 2 knowing that it's not going to hit as good, but I'm still ready nonetheless. Next book that I read was sadly my first DNF of November, and that is The Book of Azriel by Amber V. Nicole. I could not stay into this story. I tried, you guys. I made it like 45% of the way through the book, probably closer to 50. I don't even remember. This book, I can't even tell you everything that it's about because it was just a wild ride. There was no constant story. There was like the world building was just like in your face, fast forward, going 100 miles an hour. I was trying to keep up. I couldn't keep up with the characters or what we actually were even doing. I know that this girl is somehow bound to a vampire, immortal possibly, and that's like her lover, and she did it to save her sister, which her sister's an immortal as well, but not like the vampire kind. And they're looking for the Book of Azriel, and I don't even really know what the Book of Azriel is. And then she ends up on this other realm or plane of existence with gods, and then the god Samael ends up getting her and like holding her captive, and then she like reluctantly helps him. Like I said, you guys, it is all over the place. I couldn't stay in it. I just gave up. I was like, you know what? I am almost halfway through this book. I don't know literally anything of what's going on. I'm just gonna DNF it. And sadly, I just don't want to push through whenever I'm not enjoying myself and I'm not into the story, whenever there's other books that I am so excited to get to. So sadly, I had to DNF almost at 50%. The next 3 books I'm going to talk about all at one time because it is an entire trilogy that I binged, and that is A Court of Honey and Ash by Shannon Mayer and Kelly St. Clair. I read A Court of Honey and Ash A Throne of Feathers and Bone, and A Crown of Petals and Ice. I know that there are 3 more books after this that follow different characters, but I really didn't want to continue, and I'll tell you why. Overall, I would give this series 3 stars because although they held my interest and I was eating them up, the writing is not the greatest. There are some phrases, some words and things that are said that just kind of jar you and bring you back to like reality, and I like to be sucked into a series. This is kind of like an urban fantasy, but not really urban fantasy. It's a little weird. But our girl starts out, she is training to be kind of like an assassin or a warrior, but she's also like the bastard daughter of the king, and no one knows that. So whenever she completes her training, all of a sudden, whenever she's taking her oath, she destroys the whole training facility and stuff, and so everyone blames her. She ends up going to the palace to have kind of like the dinner and take the oath in front of the king and to declare where they want to be stationed at. Whenever she is there, things happen. She has to be on the run. She finds some rebels in kind of like this Bermuda Triangle area, and she gets mixed in with them. But a long time lover, shall we say, someone that she has been head over heels for since she was young, comes back into her life, and the story goes from there. There's mystery, there is politics, there is a really good world building, a rebellion happening. You think the king is evil, you think one thing, but really it's another thing. It took me for a ride. The romance was good. I felt like the pacing was really, really good as well. These books are very quick. They are between 300 and 380 pages. They're not that long, but they are fast-paced. They will keep you really invested in the story. But there are just some moments where you're like, really? Or you wanted to use that type of phrasing. Like, it just didn't mesh with the story. It felt really juvenile at times, and that's okay. These are not really that spicy. I really enjoyed them, but by the time you get to book 3 and the ending, I was just so exhausted at that point. I was like, I really loved this starting out, and now I'm just ready for it to be over with. That's why I'm not gonna go on to the spin-off series. It was good. I loved the twists. I didn't see some of it coming. However, if you want a bingeable series and you want a fantasy romance series that really isn't that spicy, then definitely, check this series out. I then read one of my arcs that is coming out towards the beginning of December, and that is called Not in My Book by Katie Holt. This was a very quick and bingeable read for me. I don't know, I was just eating it up. It is a contemporary romance where you have Rosie, who has nothing other than dreams of making it in New York as a writer, a romance writer to be exact. But basically Aiden comes in and he's a literary fiction writer. He doesn't like romance. He doesn't like the genre, or really even Rosie for that matter, because her personality just is very contrast to him. So he just finds it annoying to be around her. They have to team up and kind of write this book together. And with him being on one side and her on the other of the spectrum of genres, it makes for a very interesting banter, and it's kind of like rivals to lovers, but they're not really rivals. They are like reluctant co-workers that end up falling in love. It was good, you guys. The banter was amazing. I felt like I was giggling and kicking my feet. If you want a fun, like laugh out loud romantic comedy book around this season that isn't really Christmas themed and deals with writers and different genre writers together, I don't even know how to say words at this point. I loved it. I definitely would recommend this to anybody who loves contemporary romance. It is pitched as The Hating Game meets Beach Read. So if you do like either one of those books, which I have never read those, then you would end up loving this book because everybody in the review section is just raving about it. So definitely go pick this up whenever it releases. The next book that I read, sadly, was my second and final DNF of November. I went several months without DNFing a book, and then all of a sudden I had 2 in 1 month, and I don't know what happened, but I just feel like this author, this is the second book from an entirely different series, and both of her books I've DNF'd, so I guess she's just not a writer for me. And that is To Bleed a Crystal Bloom by Sarah A. Parker. This is a beautiful edition. It came from Page and Wick. It was their very first book that they had whenever they launched their thing like a year ago. I want to say a year and a half ago. This book, I could not get into it. It is wild and a little gross, in my opinion. You're following our girl who was basically raised from like a very young age by this guy, and he requires her to like put a drop of blood in this drink every night that he drinks it, and it's their romance. And I just couldn't get behind that. Like, she, starting out from the very first chapter, in her point of view, she's pining after him. She's like, oh, I just love whenever he drinks it. And I'm just like, really? Really? Like, you're kind of held captive. This is like Stockholm Syndrome. I couldn't get behind it. I made it not even halfway. I was like, I'm done. I can't do this, because every chapter was her pining after him. Where is he? What is he doing? Why won't he talk to me? Why doesn't he want my blood tonight? And I'm just like, girl, I can't do this. Like, you are insane. I couldn't go. I don't know if the book gets better. I don't know if the series gets better. I just couldn't push through. So sadly, I DNF'd it. And then the final book that I read in November, which I'm reading the second and final book right now, which I should finish that at the very beginning of December. But the first book is Nightshade by Carrie Lake. I love this. This is my first time reading anything from this author. I was wanting kind of a dark, gothic-y fantasy romance is what I was looking for. So I was scrolling through my Audible and I saw Nightshade on there, and I owned both of them, Nightshade and Infernium. So I was like, you know what? Let's just give Nightshade a shot, because I've been hearing a lot of people talk about Carrie Lake on Anathema, I think is her newest release that she has, and people are eating it up. I did get a book from, I think, Lit Haven, which was Nocticadia by her. So I was like, you know what? I already own this. Let's read it. I am so happy I did. I am having the time of my life. I gave Nightshade 4 stars. This book is very gothic-y, very like paranormal fantasy-esque, and the romance is really spicy. But it deals with like angels and demons and different types of creatures, and it deals with reincarnation. And Nightshade is like a different realm. It's kind of like purgatory, but like where purgatory maybe is a little bit more enjoyable for some people, not for others, because Nightshade is where people go who don't believe in, I think, the angels and don't believe in God and stuff, something like that. But our girl, her father is missing. He went missing years and years ago. She thought that he was dead, so she took up after him with like religious iconology and numerology, so she majored in that. One day, a detective shows up at her house asking her if he could help her, or if she could help him with this new case of a murder that had just happened. She's like, I don't even know who this person is. I don't know how I can help you. And somehow it stems back to her father and what he was researching, which was like this centuries old cult. And so she was like, I don't want to help you, whatever. She ends up seeking out somebody and ending up getting to Nightshade because she is trying to find this Lord Van Croy, I think is how you say his last name. She ends up in Nightshade trying to find her way around. Weird things are happening. It's like the spooky gothic elements that are not horror, but just like set the mood, right? Like think of Nightshade as kind of like a foggy, sleepy hollow type thing where you have creatures in the woods, you have spirits everywhere that don't even know that they're dead. Just, it's crazy. But anyway, she ends up finding Van Croy, finding out about who she is, what her father was doing. It is dual POV, but you also get the past POVs as well. And I don't want to say who they are or how they're connected because that would give away kind of the mystery aspect of the book. I'm loving it, you guys. I really, really am. It's gory in parts. It has that horror feel without it being scary. It's just one of those like setting the mood of like a good Halloween read. So I guess I should have read it maybe in October, but nonetheless, I absolutely enjoyed it this month and I am almost done with Infernium. So we'll see how I like that towards the end. But I really do like it. So if Infernium holds up just like Nightshade was, I feel like I'm going to be reading a lot of Carrie Lake in the future. Alright, you guys, those are all the books that I read in November. Let me know down below, have you read any of these books? Do you want to read any of these books after hearing me talk about them? If you don't want to leave me a comment, but you want to leave me an emoji, leave me a flower emoji for To Bleed a Crystal Bloom, and that'll let me know that you were here for the whole time. But other than that, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!